Hey there, and welcome back to Dad Mode, God, Grit, and Goals. I'm your host, Mike Tobias, and I want to start today's episode by asking you a question. Have you felt it too? That sense that the world is getting more divided by the day? Like everyone is shouting from their corner and nobody's really listening anymore? It's exhausting, right? But here's the thing. We don't have to get caught up in that. Hard to believe during the election. Seems like we have to. We don't have to let the noise of division control how we show up for our families or even how we live our lives. So today I want to talk about how we as dads, as men, as leaders in our families can rise above that noise. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it means to stay grounded in a world that's constantly trying to pull us apart. And I found some answers in a conversation I heard recently between Jordan Peterson and a gentleman by the name of Greg Hurwitz. I had not heard of him before. I would definitely recommend checking him out. He's quite a fascinating author and has done some interesting research. So they touched on some key ideas that I believe can help us navigate these challenges, not just for ourselves, but for our kids too. So here's what we're going to dive into today. First, we're going to talk about how to step out of the victim-oppressor mindset. It's become very common these days. We've got to learn how to reclaim control of our own lives. Then we're going to explore the power of gratitude and how practicing it can shift our entire perspective. We'll also get into the role of bad actors, both foreign and domestic, those who are manipulating us through social media, and what we can do to protect ourselves and our kids from getting caught up in the chaos. And finally, we're going to talk about finding the balance between encouraging creativity and maintaining stability in our families, something that I think is more important now than ever. So stick with me, because by the end of this episode, you're going to be having some practical tools to help you rise above the noise. That's my hope anyway. That's my aim. I'm going to help you stay grounded and making an attempt to help you lead your family with confidence. So let's start with something Jordan Peterson talks about a lot. It's this idea of the victim-oppressor narrative. And I've seen this, pop up in so many places. Whether it's in the news, social media, or even just in conversation with people. It's the idea that everything gets boiled down to us versus them. You're either a victim or you're the oppressor. And here's the kicker. Neither of those roles gets you anywhere productive. So Peterson explains it like this. If you view the world in an oppressor-victim narrative, there's only three roles. You're a victim, you're an oppressor, or you're a persecutor. None of those are good roles. And he's right. I mean, think about it. If you're always seeing yourself as the victim, where's the room for growth? How do you step up and take control of your life if you're always looking for someone else to blame? And if you're constantly playing the oppressor in someone else's story, well, that's a pretty dark road too. So it's subtle, isn't it? The mindset can creep in without us even realizing it. Maybe at work, you feel like your boss is constantly against you, that no matter what you do, you're being overlooked or undervalued, or in relationships. It's easy to think, they just don't get me. And then we feel like the victim of someone else's actions, this kind of thinking. It is a trap. It keeps us from taking ownership of our lives. And even worse, it gives us an excuse not to try. As a dad, this really hits home for me. I want my kids to learn that, yes, life isn't always fair. In fact, I would often say that. It's not fair. You're right, it's not. There are going to be challenges, and sometimes things will feel stacked against them. But I don't want them to get stuck in a mindset where they feel powerless. I don't want them to have some kind of default of their thinking, this happened to me and there's nothing I can do about it. That's not the kind of mentality that leads to resilience or growth. And I think that is the aim of raising our children. It's certainly the aim of ourselves personally. Think about it like this. Every time we let ourselves believe we're just victims of our circumstances, We hand over our power. I talk to this at my leaders at work. Don't tell anyone it's what I want. I'm the boss. Don't hand over your power. No, it's what the organization needs. And it is what, as such, it is what you need. It's not because Mike says so. Don't hand over your power. We stop seeing possibilities when we do that. We stop seeing the part of the story that we can control. And man, I've been there. I've had those moments where it felt like everything was out of my hands. I certainly wanted to blame the economy or blame the subprime mortgage crisis or the bank. I could have stayed in that place, feeling sorry for myself, looking for someone to blame. But what good would that have done? I did that for many years. Let me share a personal example. So there was a time in my life when I was overwhelmed. Work wasn't going the way I expected, and I felt like I wasn't making progress. It was so easy to point fingers, to think it's the environment, the management, the system that's failing me. I knew I had to shift my mindset when I started asking myself what I could do differently, how I could take responsibility for my next step. That's when everything started to change. I took ownership of my role in the situation, and that gave me the clarity to see opportunities I hadn't noticed before. It was a real turning point. I had a great mentor young in my professional career, and I was getting very frustrated that people inside the company weren't doing what I thought they should be. And he said, well, why aren't you? I'm like, well, that's not my role. And he said, if you will do the things that you see need to be done, then you will be given the role that is required. So I started doing that. A few years later, I ended up becoming the president of that organization. That's the mindset I want to pass on to my kids. I want them to know that they have the ability to take responsibility for their actions and their future. They can't control everything that happens to them, but they can always control how they respond to it. And that is powerful. We've talked about personal responsibility here on Dad Mode before, how important it is to own your choices, to step up when things get hard. But I want to go a bit deeper on this today. I want my kids to understand that life is not about being victims or oppressors. It's not about being stuck in this binary where everything is someone else's fault. Instead, it's about how we can grow, how we can improve, and how we can take charge of the things we can control. Think about how freeing that is. How different life looks when you stop blaming external forces and start focusing on what you can change. Maybe you can't change the economy or fix systems around you, but you can change how you show up every day. You can change how you approach challenges. You can take control of the small things in your life, and those small things build momentum for the bigger changes. You know, this victim-oppressor mindset is something I've been talking about with my kids recently. Now, they're not little anymore. They're all adults. My kids are between 21 and 31. But the thing is, these lessons don't stop when your kids hit adulthood. If anything, stakes get higher. This is what I tell young parents now. Let your kids make mistakes while they're young. They're much cheaper that way. As they get older, they're navigating real life pressures, careers, relationships, financial responsibilities. And it can be so easy to fall into the trap of thinking life's just happening to them. One of my kids was going through a tough time at work not too long ago. They felt like they were hitting a wall, like no matter what they did, they weren't getting the recognition or the opportunities they deserved. We had a long conversation about it, and I could hear the frustration in their voice, feeling stuck, feeling like someone else was calling the shots, and there wasn't much they could do about it. And that's a hard place to be in. I've been there too. But what I told them is this: you can't control how other people see you or how your boss treats you, but you can control what you bring to the table. You can control how you show up every day, your attitude, your effort. And sometimes when you shift your mindset and focus on what you can change, you'd be surprised how the situation itself starts to shift too. And here's the thing, it's not just about work. This mindset comes up in so many areas of adult life: relationships, finances, even your own personal health and well-being. It's easy to get caught up in a feeling like a victim of your circumstances, or for me, a victim of your age. But when you start asking yourself, what part of this can I own? What can I do differently? That's actually where the magic happens. So I like to ask, what can you control right now? What's the one thing you can do to take responsibility for your situation? Because here's the truth. When we take ownership, when we stop blaming and start acting, it changes everything. That's what I want all my kids to understand as they go through life. Life's not always fair, and it's not always going to hand you what you think you deserve. But you always have a choice in how to respond to it. And I'd ask the same thing of you. Where in your life do you feel stuck? Where are you seeing yourself as the victim? Is it your job? Is it your health? Maybe even a relationship? What would happen if you stopped asking, why me, and started asking, what can I do about it? Look, I'm not saying it's easy. There have been times in my life when I felt like everything was out of my control. But what I've learned, and what I'm still learning, is that we have more power than we think. We can't always control what happens to us, but we can control our mindset, our actions, and how we show up every day. It's like I tell my kids now. When you take responsibility for what you can control, you give yourself a chance to grow, a chance to change, and a chance to move forward. That's the real power. Not just for them, but for all of us. And that brings me to another point that Peterson made that really hit home for me. Gratitude. Man, this concept, it seems simple on the surface, but the more you dig into it, the more profound it becomes. Jordan Peterson says, that's why so much classical religious practice focuses on gratitude, because if you're focusing on what's good about the position that you're in, it stops you from falling into that vengeful, resentful victim category. And I think that's right. I think that's really powerful. Gratitude. Just hearing the word, you might think, sure, it's nice to be thankful, but it's so much more than that. I think gratitude is a mindset. It's a practice. It's an active decision to focus on what you have instead of what you're lacking or what's going wrong. It is the idea of focusing on the greatest good. And let me tell you, that isn't always easy. I've had plenty of days where it was hard to find anything to be grateful for, days where I felt like nothing was going right, where the weight of life was just too heavy. But here's what I've learned. In those moments when everything feels out of control, gratitude is the one thing you can control. It's the key that unlocks a shift in perspective. It doesn't change your circumstances, but it absolutely changes how you experience them. Instead of spiraling into resentment or frustration, gratitude pulls you back to what's real, what's good, and what's still within your power. I say the physical world changes. It's very difficult and takes time to change the physical world, but the spiritual world, our spirit, can change in an instant with a change in perspective. And I think gratitude is the key to that change in perspective. In our house, when our kids were young, we had this game we played at the dinner table. If you're listening, you're going to remember. It was called The Best Thing That Happened to Me Today. Someone would kick it off by saying, the best thing that happened to me today. And before they could even finish the sentence, all the other kids would shout back, hey, just like a chorus. Then the person would have to share something they were grateful for, something good that happened to them that day. And let me tell you, it worked like a charm. Picture 6 kids around the dinner table, all excited to share their stories, big or small. Sometimes it was something simple like, I'm glad I got extra recess today, or I had my favorite snack at school. Other times they'd share deeper things like, I'm grateful I did well on a test, or I helped a friend with a problem. But the point wasn't how big or small the best thing was. The point was that each of them had to find something good in their day, no matter what. This practice did more than just fill the dinner table with conversation. It shifted the whole atmosphere. Instead of usual complaints or stresses of the day, we were all focused on the positive. It gave us a reason to reflect on the little victories and moments of joy that we might otherwise have overlooked. And when you have 6 kids around the table sharing these moments, it turns the dinner into something special. It wasn't just about the food, it was about the connection, about gratitude, about celebrating each other's small wins. That's the power of gratitude. It shifts the conversation from what's wrong to what's right. It forces you to look for the good, even on the days when it feels like nothing went your way. And over time, that mindset sticks. It teaches you and your kids to see the world a little differently, to focus on the things that are going well instead of getting bogged down by what isn't. Let me give you another personal example. When I was carrying around all that extra weight and feeling pretty low about myself, it was so easy to get stuck in a negative loop. I'd wake up exhausted, joints hurting, frustrated with myself, disconnected. I'd think about how I'd let things slide, and it weighed on me physically and mentally. I used age as an excuse, but there was a turning point. Instead of staying stuck in that place, I started practicing gratitude. I remember thinking about my friend Dean, who was battling cancer. I thought, at least I'm not in a cancer chair. I need to get out. I need to do something. I'm grateful I still have my health. I'm grateful I can change. I'm grateful for the people in my life who support me no matter what. And that shift, it was a game changer. It didn't happen overnight. But once I started focusing on what I could be thankful for, it gave me motivation to make those changes. It wasn't about losing weight. It was about appreciating my health. It was about appreciating the journey, the fact that I could improve my health, the fact that I had people around me who cared. And that's the power of gratitude. It reframes the struggle as part of the process, something you can learn from instead of something that weighs you down. Here's the challenge, though. It's easy to talk about gratitude when things are going well, right? But when you're in the trenches, when life feels tough, that's actually when it matters most. That's when gratitude becomes a lifeline. It's not about ignoring the hard stuff. It's about acknowledging that, yes, life is challenging right now, but there's still something good here. I think that's what the Bible means when he says, ask and you will find. Knock and it shall be open. Seek and you will find. Ask and it will be given to you. There's still something to be thankful for. So we have to ask, we have to seek, we have to knock. So I want to challenge you, just like I challenge myself. Where can you start practicing gratitude in your life today? It doesn't have to be grand. It could be as simple as saying, I'm grateful I woke up this morning. I remember my dad saying, I'm thankful for inhaling and exhaling privileges. I think he got that from my grandfather. But the more you do it, the more you'll find those moments of gratitude stacking up. And those moments, they start to change everything. I'm going to shift gears here again. Let's talk about another thing that Jordan Peterson and Greg Hurwitz brought up in their podcast. The role of bad actors. No, I'm not talking about your kid's school play. I'm talking about foreign governments and media manipulation. We're talking about countries like Russia, China, and Iran. By now, I hope you know they've been using social media as a tool to mess with us, to make us more divided, more angry. Peterson said bad actors, including Iran, China, and Russia, are using social media to distort the political views of young people, especially young women, in ways that are extremely damaging to the culture. They're taking advantage of their good nature. Here's what's crazy. This isn't just about politics. It's not just about who's voting for who or what side of the aisle you're on. These bad actors are smart. They know exactly where to hit us, where we're most vulnerable. They spread these messages that tap into our deepest fears and insecurities. They know how to push our buttons, how to make us see the worst in each other. And if you're on social media, you know it works. If we're constantly fighting each other, constantly being pulled into these emotional reactions, we're weaker. Look at our news channels now. They are so divided. We can't even agree on what the facts are. So we're less likely to trust one another, less likely to have real conversations. And that division, that anger, it serves their agenda. It's destabilizing us as a society. We have to be attuned to this. And I'm not just talking about adults here. This manipulation is targeting our kids. Hurwitz pointed this out. He's absolutely right. These platforms are designed to capture attention, to make you react emotionally, and our kids are right in the crosshairs. Think about how much time they spend online, scrolling through feeds filled with outrage, fear, or false promises. It's truly like the Wild West out there. And unless we teach them how to navigate it, they're going to get caught up in the same emotional roller coaster that so many adults are already on. They don't even know it. As dads, we need to be aware of this. We need to teach our kids how to think critically, how to not just accept everything they see online at face value. And I'll be honest, it's not easy. I've had these conversations with my own kids, and even as adults, they're not immune to it. None of us are. One thing I've tried to model at home, especially when the kids were younger, is how to ask the right questions. I'd say, all right, here's the information. Where's this coming from? Who benefits if you react this way? What's the bigger picture here? My wife likes to say, we need to zoom out. I'm still having those conversations today, but it's about digging deeper, recognizing when you're being pulled into an emotional reaction, then pausing before you respond. It's hard, especially because everything online is designed to get you to react instantly. We're not wired for calm reflection in these matters. We're wired for quick emotional responses. But that's exactly what these bad actors count on. They know that the more we react without thinking, the easier it is to manipulate us. So if we can teach our kids, whether they're 10 or 25, to be aware of this manipulation, we're giving them tools to stay grounded. We're teaching them to pause, to think critically, to stay focused on what really matters instead of getting swept up in the noise. I'll give you a recent example from my own life. I was scrolling through social media. I came across a post that really got under my skin. You know the type. It was designed to provoke, to stir up, to outrage. It worked. My first instinct was to dive into the comments and just become a keyboard warrior, firing off my own response and set the record straight. I mean, I was ready. But then I stopped for a second and asked myself, what is it about this post that's triggering me so much? Is engaging with this really going to change my day? Or is this post just baiting me into an argument? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The post was doing exactly what it was designed to do. It was baiting me into an emotional reaction, pulling me into a conversation that was going to be productive. And once again, I recognized that it was a lot easier just to let it go. I didn't need to jump in. And honestly, my day was better off because I didn't. Now, I'm sharing this because I think we've all been there, right? Social media is full of posts like this, and it's easy to get sucked in. But this is exactly what those bad actors count on, getting us to react without thinking, without questioning the bigger picture. They know that if we're constantly reacting emotionally, then we're easier to manipulate. That's why I think it's so important to model this kind of self-awareness and critical thinking, not just for ourselves, but for our kids too. If we can pause, take a breath, and ask those key questions. Who benefits if I react this way? What's the real agenda here? We can avoid falling into the traps that are set for us online. And the more we practice this ourselves, the more we can help our kids do the same. It's not about telling them not to feel. It's about teaching them to recognize when they're being manipulated and choose how to respond. And listen, I'm not saying I've got this all figured out. It's a constant practice for me too. But the more we can model this mindset of critical thinking and self-awareness, the more we can help our kids navigate this crazy digital world without getting lost in it. So the last thing I want to touch on is something Jordan Peterson talks about. It's the balance between creativity and stability. This is a cool idea. It strikes a chord with me. It's not just for society, but for us as parents too. Peter says, he says any healthy culture needs both the innovators and creatives who push the boundaries and bring about change, and the stabilizers who hold on to the core values and structures that keep everything from falling apart. He put it this way. You need that experimentation, but you have to differentiate the genuine experimenters from the people who are attempting to demolish the culture. As dads, we walk that same line for our families. We want our kids to be curious, to take risks, to think outside the box. We want them to feel confident exploring new ideas and new challenges. But we also know that part of our role is to keep them grounded, to set boundaries, create routines, pass down values that give them a solid foundation to build on. It's a balance, fostering creativity while making sure they know where their roots are. One thing I've always tried to do is encourage my kids to push themselves, to take on challenges, but always within the framework of the values we hold as a family. And one of the strongest principles we've carried with us is the Tobias family mantra. Tobias says, do hard things. That's what we live by. It's a reminder that growth comes from taking on the tough challenges, not shying away from them. And here's where the balance comes in. We wanted our kids to know it's okay to fail. It's okay to try new things and not have them work out the way that they had hoped, because they've always got that foundation beneath them. In our house, there were certain non-negotiables, things like family dinner. That was sacred time. And when things got too crazy, we made it family breakfast. The time of day didn't matter. It's just that once a day, we knew we were getting together. Our core values of honesty, respect, hard work, they're always at the center of everything. No matter what creative path they were on, those principles were their guide. So now, as adults, I see how those values still shape them. They know they have the freedom to explore, to innovate, but they're also grounded in something real. They know how to take on a challenge because they've practiced it their whole lives. They know how to do hard things. That's the kind of balance we need in society too, right? But unfortunately, right now, we've got politicians who are just telling us, you don't have a problem. The problem's on the other side. You don't need to do anything. And if you vote for me, it's going to be easy. It's like, no one is telling us, no, it's going to be hard. And we do hard things. Politicians aren't going to save the day. Our government is not going to save us. We need creativity and innovation to keep us moving forward, but we need the stability of core values to hold it all together. As dads, we play such a key role in helping our kids navigate that balance in their own lives. We teach them to be resilient, to take risks, but also to stay rooted in what's important. And that's a gift that's going to serve them for the rest of their lives. So what's the big takeaway from all this? It boils down to a few key principles that we can carry with us in both our personal lives and as fathers. First, we don't have to buy into the narrative of division. We don't have to see ourselves or teach our kids to see themselves as victims in this world. Instead, we can embrace responsibility. We can take ownership of our actions, our responses, and ultimately our lives. When we shift from a victim mindset to one of ownership, everything changes. We regain control. Second, we can cultivate gratitude. It's a powerful practice that helps us refocus on what's good in our lives, even in the midst of challenges. Think about the book of Job. Gratitude shifts our mindset from scarcity to abundance, from frustration to possibility. It's a simple practice, but one that can reshape our entire perspective, and that's something we can model for our kids, helping them see the good, no matter how small, in every day. And third, we have a responsibility to teach our kids to think critically. In a world filled with noise, distractions, and bad actors trying to manipulate us, we have to equip them with the tools to question, to reflect, and to resist reacting emotionally. If we can help them pause, think, and make intentional decisions, we give them a skill that will serve them for a lifetime. And finally, we find balance. Balance between creativity and stability. Without stability, you can't be creative. Balance between exploration and groundedness. If everything is just exploration, there is no central theme. As dads, we play a vital role in encouraging our kids to push boundaries and think outside the box, while also giving them the firm foundation they need to come back to. Train up a child in the way they should go, and they will not depart from it. It's about helping them navigate life's challenges with the confidence that they can handle what comes their way because they're rooted in strong values. So here's my challenge to you this week. How can you put these principles into action in your own life? Where are you letting division or victim mentality creep in? And how can you take back control? What are you grateful for today? What conversations can you have with your kids to help them think more critically about what they see online and in a world around them? And finally, how are you balancing creativity and stability, both for yourself and for your family? The choice is yours. We get to decide whether we let the world's noise pull us apart or whether we focus on what unites us. As dads, we have an incredible opportunity to shape not only our own responses, but also the way our families see the world. That's the power we have in our hands every day. So thanks for joining me on Dad Mode today. I'd love to hear from you. What's your takeaway from this episode? What hard things are you and your family taking on this week? Let's keep this conversation going. And as always, remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about showing up every day with grit, grace, and growth. So until next time, remember our 4 core truths. God is good. Jesus has forgiven me. I am loved, and everything is possible. Have a great week.